Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Erin Molan Show. This is a bonus for you, and I know that I'm always a very big fan of the content that we produce. I mean, I would hope so. But this woman is something else. Her name is Marissa Streit. You will know who she is. She is the CEO of PragerU, an incredibly talented woman, gets it. And that is key, and it's a key theme of our conversation. We talk so much about this rot that is occurring in Western civilization at the moment. Her focus for so long has been on education, on what we are doing with young people, on gender ideology, on this woke movement that is just essentially destroying the minds of young people. I often say, how can this be? Somebody explain to me, please, how feminists who will try and sack someone because they've complimented a woman or said she's pretty will march alongside terrorist murderers and deny the rape of Israeli women. Make it make sense. You know what she actually does, this woman? She makes it make sense. She explains how we got here. It's actually really obvious. The way she puts it is so easy to understand. You do not want to miss this episode. It is crucial to understanding why the world is so upside down. And in order for us to fix it, we have to understand how we got here. So, my wonderful, legendary viewers and listeners, please enjoy this very special episode of the Erin Molan Show. And I'll be back with regular programming, 6 a.m. Monday from the US, from Florida, where I'm here for a conference, and then to New York for another conference. But I'll tell you all about that a little bit later on. But for now, Marissa Streit. Marissa, first of all, thank you so much for joining me here on the Erin Molan Show. It's such an honor to have you on.
The honor is really all mine.
Tell me what you think when you look at the world as it is now. Do you feel optimistic or do you feel physically ill? I kind of go between the two.
Yeah, well, you know, it's the 2,500-year-old question. And I think that joy, happiness, brightness is a choice. Even optimism is a choice. And, you know, I think that we can be optimistic about what is happening in the world, but that would maybe lead us to not do that much because we'd say, oh, the pendulum is going to swing and we don't need to worry about it. We can be pessimistic about what's happening in the world and say, you know what, everything is so terrible. Let me just crawl into a hole and hide and then do nothing about it. And so for me, as I learned from Dennis Prager, it's really not about optimism or pessimism. Ultimately, it's about a choice. It's a choice that we make to wake up every single day and be preoccupied with the good and the beautiful. And that's why I love watching people like you. And I think one of the problems on social media is that it leans into the human instinct to pay attention to what actually worries us and hurts our feelings, right? Social media, if you think about it, is a 10x preconditioning of the fear that humans experience. And so if something drops at the far end of my office right now, I will immediately pay attention to it because we've been conditioned to save ourselves and to have this instinct of anxiety and danger. Well, social media will 10x that, right? And so you'll keep clicking on those things that scare you the most. You'll keep clicking on those things that cause you most anxiety, and that will lead you to be in a dark place. And so for those of us who spend a lot of time on social media, we actually have to make a choice. We have to make a choice to see brightness and to think about happiness and to really focus on what is good and beautiful so that we don't really drive ourselves crazy because we're not conditioned to the type of anxiety that social media can develop in our brains.
It's such a powerful point you make, and I look at a group of people that I wasn't really exposed to that much prior to October 7, but have spent a lot of time with, and that's the Israeli Jewish population post-October 7. And when I went to visit Israel straight afterwards and went to the kibbutz, and of course there was overwhelming tragedy and despair, and it was horrific in every single way. But what I was struck by was this unbelievable ability these people had to choose to see light, despite this saturation of what appeared to me to be darkness everywhere. You know, I'd go to a kibbutz and there'd be a lady out the front tending to the roses, and I'd say, "Oh, is this your home?" And she'd say, "Oh, no, this woman's been taken hostage. I've never met her. I just don't want her flowers to die when she's away, so I come once a week." And that's a choice to do something bright in a dark world, isn't it? And I look at these people who just blow me away with their resilience, and we can all make that choice, though, right?
Well, we can make the choice, and I think Israelis have to make that choice.
Yeah.
And I'll share with you a story from the Talmud that has inspired me for years. It's the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva visited the temple in Jerusalem after it was destroyed with 2 additional sages, and the 3 of them were walking and looking at the temple completely destroyed. It was so destroyed that actually a fox came out of the holies of holy. Well, the fox is known as this unclean, impure animal, and the sages walking with Rabbi Akiva were weeping. They were crying. They were hysterical because of the destruction that they were witnessing. And Rabbi Akiva was giggling. He was giggling, he was laughing, he was smiling. And so the sages look at Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, are you out of your mind? How can you be smiling at this time of horror, of destruction? How could this even happen? And Rabbi Akiva looked at the sages with next to him, and he said, not until I witnessed the destruction of the temple, as it was foretold that it would happen, did I realize that all of the foretold stories in the Bible are likely to come true as well. And so sometimes, Erin, we don't have that bigger perspective that God has for us. Yes. And sometimes our human nature is to pay attention to that which is negative and that which is dark. But God wants us to experience goodness. God doesn't want us to experience darkness. And this is why I believe Israelis continue to celebrate and to choose life even when they're confronted with the most demonic, the most evil. And I think that is really their secret power. It's their secret power to choose life. And I think part of that secret power comes from the understanding of what the Old Testament, the Torah, taught them. And that's that wisdom and discernment from King Solomon.
Talk to me about the direction, and I say that we are headed in, and that is a very wide grouping. I understand that absolutely. Trump in office in the US. Let's start with America maybe initially. He's just brokered this historic peace deal, and whether or not that turns out to be is another question. I want to end the interview on that point with you, if I may come back to it. But do you think the steps that are being taken, maybe from a governmental perspective in the US, are leading us into the right direction, are going to make it easier for people to find the light and to choose to be positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what President Trump has brought to the table now is a completely new perspective on how to deal with the Middle East. And never in my lifetime did I actually think we would see peace in the Middle East. It would be this joke that we would, throw around. And I think the reason it is no longer a joke, but something that we actually can contemplate and take seriously, is that he's been able to level the playing field. And so, number one, he has been able to discern that the issue with Hamas is not just Hamas itself, the terrorist group, but it's the funders and the supporters behind Hamas, whether it was Qatar or Turkey or the wealthy individuals in the West who are constantly fueling this terrorist organization. Trump has been able to bring to the table the moderate Arab countries who truly do not want any more war, and they want financial stability, they want growth, they want to move into the next century with prosperity. And by bringing those countries into the conversation where, I mean, frankly, they don't want any of this terrorism. This is why you didn't see Palestinian flags and for the river to the sea marches in any of these moderate Arab countries. You actually see them, ironically, in the wealthy Western countries because we've been taken over. And so Donald Trump understood that. He understands that bringing those key players who have really kind of sat on the sidelines instead of stopping these Hamas terrorist groups who they knew are dangerous. I mean, the Qataris and the Turks and many of them, I mean, obviously the Saudis, they know what they're dealing with here. It's the Westerners. It's the Westerners who don't get it, right? They live in this cognitive dissonance. And so Trump has been able to bring all of them to the table and basically say, let's strike a deal. Let's level the playing field here, and let's come up with not a zero-sum game, but actually a larger sum game where we can all benefit from peace and prosperity in the Middle East. And that's why I think this peace treaty is different from any one that we have seen in the past, because it's not just between the Israelis and the Gazans, but it's actually a much bigger picture. It's the people who have been funding or giving safe harbor to the Hamas group. It's about going after Iran and really bringing them back down to their knees and making sure that they no longer fuel this kind of terrorism and hatred around the world, as well as in Gaza and in Israel. And by really looking at the entire deal from a bigger picture, how everybody can actually benefit from peace and get prosperity, I think he changed many of the elements. Now, it's not to say that now Hamas is suddenly going to be willing to play ball, because their entire existence is about the river to the sea. It's about annihilating all of the Jews living in Israel. And so, that's a different conversation. But could there be hope that now we could see peace in the Middle East now that the players have changed a little bit? I think it's going to be certainly interesting and more possible than it has ever been in the past.
Really well put. My dad used to say cautiously optimistic, which I think I subscribe to in this instance. One of the parts of this that I think I'm more excited about than almost anything else is Indonesia. And it doesn't get talked about a lot, but particularly off the back of President Prabowo's speech at the United Nations, and it sounds utterly ridiculous that you should be grateful to a world leader for acknowledging another democratic nation's right to exist, but this is the world we live in. The world's largest Islamic nation, the leader saying shalom at the United Nations, we cannot underplay the significance of this. And I grew up in Indonesia. I spent 7 years there. I was there last week having meetings with ministers. I'm very passionate about that country, and I've been working incredibly hard for a couple of years to try and figure out a way that Indonesia can play a bigger role here, because I think they are so powerful and capable, and they deserve a place up there. But they've got to speak out against this extremism. And they will tell me privately, we hate Islamic extremism more than Israel does, more than the West does, more than anyone else. Well, clearly more than the West does, because the West marches for it. But I feel like their involvement here and the power of the world's largest Islamic nation coming to the party as well can't be underplayed either, can it?
Well, first of all, we have to give credit to Donald Trump, who understood that the moderate Arab countries hate terrorism. They hate terrorism more than the West hates terrorism. And so while Israel is doing the dirty work for the entire world, because Israel's the only one that's willing to actually fight terrorism, right? They're the guinea pigs who are actually doing all the heavy lifting and all the work while still being attacked and humiliated by silly Westerners who don't understand what's going on. You have people in Indonesia who understand what terrorism actually looks like and where it's initiated from. And so they're all these Arab countries, they're breathing a sigh of relief that Israel is willing to do the heavy lifting. Again, Donald Trump understands that, and sadly, much of the world's left is living in the cognitive dissonance that they've developed in the Ivy League schools.
Yeah, haven't they just? I want to talk to you about Charlie Kirk, and we're talking a lot about choosing hope and to look at things in a positive light. This resurgence of people wanting to talk about God and religion and conservative family values and all the things that he cared so deeply about. Have you seen that in your experience? You guys are so, I was looking at some of your stats and the groups that you attract essentially, and the people that consume your content, and a lot of them are very young. I sometimes get worried because when I look at the average age of my viewers, they're like 70, and I love all of my 70-year-old fans, but you seem to be able to tap into that youth. What kind of feedback are you getting, and are you confident in the future, particularly off the back of what seems to be a resurgence in the things that make the West good?
Yeah, well, first of all, I do think that there has been a religious revival since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I'll say one more thing about Charlie Kirk. There is something that you're seeing all over social media now, and that is that everybody is claiming that Charlie was their best friend. And I think it really says a lot about Charlie and not about the best friends. I have this dream that every single one of my kids will say that when they grow up, that I thought that they were my favorite child. And Charlie had that ability to make every single one of us feel like we're his best friend. He always responded to the text messages and all of that. And I think that is just so amazing. And the other amazing thing
can I stop you there? And I hate interrupting, but what you've just said is so profound, because a lot of the criticism of so many people coming out and saying he was my best friend is people are saying you're just trying to jump off the back of something that's happened and trying to make yourself feel important. You've just given a completely different perspective. Maybe Charlie actually made every single one of those people feel like they were his best friend.
Yeah,
That's
well, I
really
get it.
Powerful.
And I have to give credit to Dennis Prager on that one, because Dennis has shared stories with me about friends that go to funerals and they walk around and they ask people like and the children of the deceased person, like tell me something about your parent, and so I've certainly learned that from Dennis, and I think it is profound. And speaking of Dennis, the relationship that Charlie Kirk and Dennis Prager had is, I don't know how many of your listeners know this, but Charlie's most recent book is about, it's called Stop in the Name of God, and it's about the Sabbath. The last time I saw Charlie was actually, Charlie kept visiting Dennis Prager at the hospital, and he would always show up with the Bible and Dennis's Torah commentary. The last time I saw him, he actually dropped off his manuscripts with Dennis and dedicated his book to Dennis. Charlie was preoccupied with goodness. He was not preoccupied with politics over the last few months, because he realized that we are in a huge fight of good versus evil, and he really was wrestling with how do we win? How do we win for good? And so one more note about Charlie and this religious revival that we are seeing in the United States of America and really around the world. And that is, I believe that this religious revival is twofold. One part of it is that people are realizing that they've had a God-sized hole in their hearts, and they have been filling in that God-sized hole with all kinds of other isms, whether it's environmentalism or transgenderism or whatever other isms. But humans by nature need meaning in their lives. We need food and we need meaning. And when you take God out of people's lives, they will find something else to pursue and to worship. And that's what we've seen very much so in the West. And I think that has been this vacuum that Charlie had been so obsessed with trying to provide people with answers. And the other thought that I had after the murder of Charlie Kirk, and I chatted with his wife, Erica, after the memorial, and I said to her, isn't this interesting that now the three largest youth-oriented organizations in the United States of America are now run by women? Think about that for a minute. Erica Kirk runs Turning Point USA. Marissa, I run PragerU because Dennis sadly is in the hospital. And Jordan Peterson hasn't been feeling well, and he's been sidelined in the hospital, and Michaela Peterson has been stepping in. And I actually texted with Michaela a few days ago, and I said, have you noticed what I've noticed? And so when I say that God works in mysterious ways, we don't understand what he is doing. But there is something worth noting. There's something worth noting. It is so easy to notice the darkness. But Erin, let's look at the light for 1 second. There has been a direct attack on the children of the West. Our children have been under attack, whether it's the COVID lockdowns or it's been the education system that is collapsing, or the transgenderism and telling kids to not be comfortable in their own bodies. Whatever it is, our children have been under attack, and the moms have been sitting on the sidelines. They have been sitting on. It has been shocking to me that so many moms have not been fighting against the transgenderism movement. And it is almost always the mom that pushes the child to get onto the puberty blockers and the surgeries. And this is something that has been very noticeable in the United States. And Charlie was very concerned about this transgenderism movement that has been really focused on young people. Look, when you're an adult, do whatever you want. But when you're a child, this idea that you're wise enough to pick your own gender, really? Erin, do you think that you were wiser when you were 10 years old than you are today? What
Marissa,
adult is listening to
I
this?
did not know myself at 22, let alone at 5, let alone at 12, let alone at 18. It is insanity.
It is more than insanity. It is
Dangerous.
absolutely dangerous. It is dangerous. Nobody who is listening to this will be able to say to me that they were wiser than when they were a child than they are today. How are we letting children chemically castrate themselves? How are we letting them do this kind of irreversible
And not
damage?
only letting them, but encouraging them, fostering it,
Oh, yes.
making it easier. It's
We made a
just,
culture out of it. We made a
yeah,
culture out of this transgenderism religion. And that's what Charlie was talking about that day in Utah when he was there. That's what he went to speak about in college campus. And my first comment to Erica Kirk, the day after the memorial of Charlie Kirk, is that I hope now that the moms will wake up, because it's been almost always the mom who's been okay with this transgenderism. It is almost never the father. Let's be
yeah,
honest about it. Let's be
yeah.
honest about it. And so maybe all of this horrible stuff that has been happening in the West and the death of Charlie Kirk, maybe this will be that moment that women will wake up, and maybe this is God's hand in saying, the
Yes.
mama bears, we need you in our society, and you need to go back to who you are. You need to go back to your maternal instinct and start
Yeah.
protecting children
Protect your
and
child.
help teach kids to discern good versus evil. The fight that
Yes.
we are fighting right now is a fight of good versus evil, whether it's terrorism versus Israel or children's humanity and nature and innocence versus evil and what is being done to them. All of this is a matter of discernment. It's the chaos. It's the chaos that we're living right now in the West in particular, because of what we've been taught and what we've been teaching in these universities. And so as we get the moms involved now to clear out this chaos,
Yeah.
I am becoming more optimistic, because I do think that when moms actually lean on their instincts, right? You
Yeah.
know what that is. When you know that you're free of the shackles of what the politically correct culture is putting on you, and you're really leaning into what you know is the truth, and you fill in your child with that God-sized hole in their hearts with real God, with real love, then they develop discernment and wisdom, and they can tell right from wrong, and they will no longer march on college campuses saying that the devils, the Hamas devils, the terrorists should win. They will no longer do that, because they will have truth.
It's not even an intervention, because it should never get to that. But you instill your child with what is right and good and natural and normal at a young age. You're not going to have these problems 20 years down the track. The mother thing is key, isn't it? The mother thing is key. I interviewed someone in the UK off the back of their big protests a little while ago, and something that really resonated. They made the point to me. They said, it was this and that, and dads came out and were angry. This is off the back of crime and young girls being sexually assaulted in the street. It's just the UK has completely fallen. It's a basket case. But they said things started to shift when the mums got involved. In the last 2 or 3 months, the mums are hitting the streets. They're going and saying, not on my watch, not on my watch. And that, it gives me shivers, because we love men, but if you really want to get something done and get it done effectively and get it done fast, put a mum in charge.
Well,
And that's what we
Erin,
need.
this is the thing, is that our society has created such gender blur and so much chaos that we've told men that we don't need them to be masculine and that we don't need them at all. The feminist movement was saying a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, right? That's what they would say to my parents.
Utterly ridiculous.
And that is utterly ridiculous. But by saying that, we've also told women that we don't have our role in society anymore, right? And so we have sidelined both very important biological, natural roles that our society actually needs. And by doing that, the effect has been catastrophic on our society, from the impossibility of dating to the impossibility of teaching young people that they want to build a home, that a home is where you get your nature, your nurture, your values, your wisdom, your love, your connection, your mental health, all of that. And really, the discernment piece, because if we can't discern between a man and a woman, and we can't discern between a child and an adult, then how can we discern between good and evil and light and darkness? How can we discern lies, right? And so we've raised, I mean, you and I are part of this generation that has been raised on lies, things we knew were lies, and we accepted them because it was politically correct and expected to accept. And so now when people are preaching lies about Israel, it is no surprise to me. I'm not in shock. I know many of the Jews that you've encountered are in shock that this is happening. I'm upset. I'm upset, but I'm not in shock, because I think this expectation that young people will have wisdom and discernment after we've been giving them a steady diet of lies since kindergarten is how can you expect them to have that wisdom and discernment? How can you expect them to discern between good versus evil when you've basically taught them to believe in lies their entire lives?
In preschool in Australia, kids sit there and they're told Australia is racist, Australia is evil, we colonise. How do you expect any child to grow up with any sense of pride in their country, to want to fight to defend the values of this nation, when they are taught to hate and despise it and that it is evil from age 3 up? Like, you're right. Why would anyone be surprised? And if you're following Black Lives Matter, if you're following, I mean, the Me Too movement absolutely had elements that were crucial. I get it. But it went way too far the other way to its own detriment. Why are we surprised? This is just the latest iteration of all of that, isn't it? These feminists marching alongside people holding up images of the leader of terrorist states, and these feminists who would get a bloke sacked in a workplace because he complimented a woman's dress are marching alongside a bloke who sent his men to rape, slaughter, murder, kill women. Make that make sense, but it does when you look at what we've done for decades.
In America, we've taught young American kids that America is a force for evil in the world. Really? Erin, go ask a South Korean how they feel about America. What South Korean is going to say, oh, I wish America never intervened. I wish we were like North Korea. No, no. But again, this is why the fight that we're in right now, the fight that you're in right now as an Australian, the fight that I'm in right now as an American, is not about Israel, right?
No,
the attack on Israel is not about Israel. It's really about the truth. It's about the truth. And notice, all of the lying liars, they're always on the same side. They're always on the side of Marxism, right? It's the LGBTQA++++. It's the BLM, and the defund the police. It's the, have no borders, have no sovereignty, castrate the children. They're always on the side of the big lies. They're the ones who call us fascists, by the way. Really? I'm a fascist? I have nothing in common with Mussolini. Mussolini was a fascist who was inspired by Karl Marx, who hated capitalism, who believed in big government, who hated the Jewish people. I'm literally the opposite of it, and they call me a fascist, and they'll call you a fascist. The people who are siding with goodness and truth and limited government. And so I think at the end of the day, when people ask, how can this be happening? The answer is that we have been teaching people lies, and we have been okay with it. People like you, and I'm really preoccupied with people like you, because you're a gem and a one of a kind, and I'm sure you get this a lot. How do we make more people like you, who are not only discerning and can tell between a lie and the truth, between good versus evil, but are willing to actually speak out against the lies, right? How do we?
Because there's a difference, isn't there?
There's a big difference. People are calling you and saying, Erin, keep going, keep going, keep going. Well, they hide and do nothing, right?
Yes.
How do we?
Key. That's key. And you make such a great point when it comes to Israel. A couple of days ago, I ran into a former mainstream media colleague who said, so, like, why have you become suddenly so, like, pro-Israel? I said, I'm not pro-Israel. I said, I'm anti-terror and I'm pro-truth. It just so happens that Israel is the victim right now of this horrific terrorism that I will condemn every day of the week. They're a democratic nation who are fighting a just war. They're not perfect, God no, but they have absolutely not just every right to defend themselves and be in this war. They have a duty to defend themselves and their people and be in this war. Pro-Israel, it's utterly ridiculous. It's like saying I'm pro-truth. Of course you are. Of course you should be. You know, it's just the idiocy that surrounds this. You know, generally with issues, Marissa, I don't know if you're the same, but there are things where I disagree with people, but I can step back and I can say, look, I see how you've come to this conclusion. I understand how you've gotten here. I completely disagree with you, and I think it's ridiculous, but I get it to a degree, blah, blah, blah. With this issue, it's just the entire thing is insanity, but you work it back to what we've done, which is condition our kids to believe lies and to see us as evil. So, you know, what do we expect? We created it.
And this is why I say Israel is not necessarily the victim in this war. I think Israel is the Iron Dome of the war against the West. They're just the first to receive all of those missiles and those attacks. But those who are chanting death to Israel or river to the sea are also chanting death to the West, death to America.
Death to America.
They're the ones who are propagating the idea that America is a force for evil in the world. They're the ones who want us to have no sovereignty and no borders, etc. And so I actually think that while Israel is, again, doing the dirty work and the messy work for the West, I don't think that they're just the victim. I actually think they're, incidentally, the protector.
100%, absolutely. And my point being is that they're the ones that are, you know, it's easy for idiots in the West who are marching to condemn them. You try living on the doorstep of bloodthirsty terrorists who don't value the lives of their own children, let alone anyone else's. You know, it's just, I mean, I keep saying it's insanity, but it's actually not. It kind of makes sense, which I'm actually much more on board with, having spoken to you now. I said earlier, Marissa, and we've got to wrap up, but I wanted to get your kind of definitive take on whether or not peace in the Middle East is possible. And that may not be possible for you to give a definitive take, but you said before that you are more hopeful than you have been, which I think is a really good way of putting it.
I think that peace in the Middle East could be possible now under conditions that we must be incredibly focused on. And so number one is the Qataris, the Turks, they can't keep giving a safe harbor for the Hamas terrorist organizations. And this really means that the United States and the West will have to continue exerting pressure on Qatar and Turkey to not provide a safe harbor for those terrorists. Number two is that we just have to be incredibly disciplined about the sanctions against Iran. And it pains me because I have many Iranian friends who I love dearly, and I know that they have family back in Iran and Tehran, and they're suffering tremendously from the sanctions. With that said, the suffering that they are experiencing is because of their regime, and 100%. We must continue to maintain the pressure on that regime. So the suffering that both the Israelis and the Iranian people are experiencing is not in vain. All of that they're going through right now, so it is not in vain. And so there needs to continue to be maximum pressure. Israel needs to be allowed to completely clean out the Hamas terrorist tunnels 100%. And completely extract Hamas. This idea that Hamas would become part of the new leadership in Gaza is as asinine as the idea that the cabinet of Hitler would remain and the leadership of Germany in 1945. Nobody in their right mind thought the Nazis should remain in power after they lost the war in 1945. And
sorry,
so
Marissa,
nobody could believe.
I just need to pick you up on something. Are you trying to tell me that a terrorist group are not going to be trusted, shouldn't be trusted in the leadership of a nation, and that we can't trust them to abide by something they have agreed to? Because, I mean, God, that's low. I mean,
that's what, right? That's what they're asking for. They're asking to have a seat at the table because, really, what country would be okay winning a war, right? They did win the war against Gaza, okay, against the Hamas terrorists, okay? Yeah. What country would be okay winning the war against terrorists that are trying to kill you and then say, okay, never mind, let me put you back in government? Yeah. Nobody would have ever been okay with it except for the country where the Jews live, really. Let's be real. If you think that that is okay, then either something is really wrong with you morally or you just hate the Jews. That's the bottom line.
Dama, Carney, Macron, they all think that it's okay. They all think it's of course Israel should accept Hamas in a leadership position. We'll recognize a Palestinian state whilst they are in charge. I mean, are they not as weak? We could talk for hours about the weakness of these absolute flops in the
I
way.
mean, talk about it, like, weak men disgust me, okay?
Me
They disgust
too.
me. Let's
Like,
be real.
not even from on so many levels, from a
So many
dating
levels.
perspective, could you just be a man? I don't want you to wax. Just
Yeah.
be a man. From a world leadership perspective, could you have, I think, who said it? I think the Argentinian president said something, and this is a translation, but he said something to the effect of, everyone will hate you essentially once you leave the leadership of any nation or country. So you might as well do what is right when you were there. But looking at our leader in Australia, trying to pander, trying to get everyone to like them, it's the most unattractive attribute, and it's dangerous.
It's disgusting, it's dangerous, and they're going to go down in history as losers.
Yes, won't they just? Marissa, you are absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for all the incredible work that you do and that your organisation does. You can't measure it, but I know that now and down the track we are a far better off society because of it. So thank you. Don't ever stop. Give Dennis our love, please. Is there any update on him before I let you go?
You know, it's a tough injury, but thankfully his mind is still there, and so I'm able to ask him some of the tough questions and sometimes bring it back to our audiences. And, you know, all I ask is that people continue to pray for him. The plan is to bombard God with so many prayers that he says, enough already, I'm going to do what you want.
Look, I've been really good with that throughout my career. I've essentially never had any talent. I've just annoyed people till they've given me a shot. So I'm going to try that with God on Dennis's behalf.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.